All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we are decoding the incredible 120-year survival story of Europe's most secretive family business empire. And to figure out exactly how they pulled this off, we're going to be applying a really fascinating analytical framework right from the start, known as the Bragagni Method.
To really wrap our heads around the sheer gravity of this topic, we first have to look at this number, 100 billion euros. It is a completely staggering figure, literally larger than the GDP of many countries. Yet it represents the combined annual turnover of just one single family's businesses, the Mulliez family.
Now, what is wild about this massive federation of brands, which includes absolute household names across Europe like Auchan, Decathlon, and Leroy Merlin, is that it's entirely privately held. We're talking about over 600,000 employees spread across more than 90 operating companies. But you almost never hear about them. And that's by design. They operate under a strict century-old motto: silence does good, and good does not make noise.
Which brings us to the ultimate question, the one that plagues pretty much every wealthy dynasty by the time they hit the third generation. You know the old saying, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. So how on earth do 1,000 cousins manage to share a sprawling empire without descending into jealousy and just completely tearing the whole thing apart?
To answer that, we turn to that framework I mentioned earlier, the Bragagni Method. This was developed by Professor Maurizio Bragagni based on his 5 decades inside his own family's business over in Tuscany. It's specifically designed to test exactly how family enterprises actually survive. So applying it to the massive Mulliez family is pretty much the ultimate stress test.
The Bragagni Method is built on 3 very specific pillars: trust, structure, and purpose. We are going to view the Mulliez family's sweeping history through these exact 3 lenses to uncover their architectural secrets. Let's start with Pillar 1, trust. For the Mulliez family, this was established right at the very beginning by the founder, Louis Mulliez. Back in 1904, he opened a small yarn twisting mill in Roubaix, France. But you see, his true genius wasn't actually in textiles. It was in how he orchestrated the relationships between his 13 children when they eventually started their own ventures.
Louis imposed his brilliant rule. He essentially forced his children to be shareholders in each other's businesses. If one sibling started a new venture, all the others had to be invested in it too. He called it everyone and everything. It established a foundational trust where success anywhere was success everywhere. No single branch of the family owned their enterprise completely alone, which totally eliminated the incentive for sibling rivalry.
And this initial trust didn't just stay informal. In 1955, long before any real family storms could brew, the second generation drafted a constitution to formalize this trust, officially creating the Association Familiale Mulliez. By doing it in calm weather, essentially fixing the roof while the sun was shining, they laid the absolute groundwork for the explosion of growth that followed in the decades to come. But of course, as time went on and the family grew into hundreds of descendants, personal trust was simply no longer enough. I mean, you can't personally know 1,000 cousins. So this introduces the second pillar of our framework, structure. The family had to build incredible institutional mechanisms to replace the personal trust that naturally dilutes as a family tree expands. They basically had to become a true republic of cousins.
To actually manage this republic, they engineered some truly brilliant survival mechanisms. They kept the cross-shareholding to prevent rivalry, but then, amazingly, they literally created their own internal stock exchange. If a cousin wanted to cash out, they sold their shares to another cousin at an internally set price. That completely solved the liquidity issue without ever needing to go public or bring in external investors.
What's even more fascinating is their strict rules separating ownership from employment. Having Mulliez blood only grants you shares. It does not hand you a job. If you want to be in leadership, you have to apply, you face a brutal evaluation, and you can absolutely be rejected. It ensures top-tier competence while keeping the actual business securely in the family's hands. Now, as we analyze the structure, we have to neutrally observe that this extreme level of closure comes with real trade-offs. On one hand, it is an extraordinary achievement in governance and wealth preservation, but on the other hand, critics are quick to point out the lack of external scrutiny. Without outside capital, there's obviously less transparency. That's led to criticisms of a closed, almost sect-like culture that demands intense conformity. And it's even sparked some incredibly complex, decade-long fiscal investigations by French authorities. This brings us to the final pillar, purpose, and boy was it put to the ultimate test in the early 1990s. Hitting that notorious third-generation cliff, with hundreds of descendants suddenly wanting liquidity, the family genuinely debated their future. Should they just sell off the empire and go their separate ways? The tension was immense, and the future of the entire federation was absolutely on the line.
But instead of cashing out, they basically locked the door and threw away the key. In 1995, they renewed their foundational pact based on affectio societatis. It's a legal term that they elevated to mean a deep, shared intention to be in business together. By combining familial affection with collective enterprise, they voluntarily committed to collective management and zero external investors, completely walking away from a massive payout.
It's honestly pretty simple. A family that only wanted returns would have sold, but their purpose anchored them. Driven by a vocabulary of solidarity, stewardship, and Catholic social thought, they shifted their horizon away from quarterly returns and focused entirely on generational legacy. Cold financial analysis didn't save them in 1992, purpose did.
Now, to prove that this framework actually works universally, Professor Bragagni compared the sprawling Mulliez Federation to his own, much more compact family business, Trebaz, which was founded in Tuscany in 1966. We're looking at a true tale of two vastly different families here to see if these core mechanics really hold up across completely different scales.
And it's amazing to see the parallels. Despite totally different sizes and industries, both families rely on the exact same underlying architecture. Neither takes outside capital. Both enforce strict, merit-based entry into management. And both are deeply, deeply grounded in a moral vocabulary.
The ultimate takeaway from unpacking this entire case study is a really profound lesson in scaling a legacy. While a founder's initial rule, like Louis Mulliez's forced cross-shareholding, creates that initial trust, massive scale eventually demands that institutional structure steps in to uphold that trust. But here is the kicker. Neither of those can survive a true generational crisis without being firmly held together by a shared purpose. So, when we circle back to the Bragagni method we started with, we can clearly see how these elements interact. Trust, structure, and purpose act as deep roots and strong branches. Together, they form a universal shield, protecting a family's legacy against the inevitable forces of division and time.
So, as you reflect on the staggering 120-year run of the Mulliez Empire and their fiercely guarded Republic of Cousins, ask yourself this. What structures, what shared purpose, and what foundational trust is your own family, or even your own organization, building today to survive the storms of tomorrow? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.